Jade Winters stared at the cream-colored envelope on her desk for the third time that morning. Her name was written in elegant calligraphy across the front, and inside, an invitation that made no logical sense. Benedict Hartley, the CEO of Hartley Industries, was inviting her, a mid-level marketing coordinator who'd only been with the company 18 months, to his private Thanksgiving dinner at Westwood Manor. She turned the card over in her fingers, searching for some explanation, some footnote that would clarify this was meant for someone else. But there it was again, Ms. Jade Winters, in that beautiful, deliberate script. Her colleague Rachel had nearly dropped her coffee when she'd glimpsed it that morning. "You're joking," Rachel had whispered, leaning over the cubicle divider. "Nobody gets invited to Westwood unless they're C-suite or family. Are you secretly related to him or something?" Jade had laughed it off, but the question haunted her throughout the day. Why her? She kept her head down, did her work efficiently, and avoided office politics like they were contagious. She certainly hadn't done anything noteworthy enough to warrant this kind of attention. Arrival at the manor. The drive up to Westwood Manor took 40 minutes through winding country roads lined with autumn trees. Jade's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter with each passing mile. She'd changed outfits 3 times before settling on a simple burgundy dress, elegant but not trying too hard, professional but not cold. When the manor came into view, her breath caught. It wasn't just a house, it was a statement. Stone walls climbed 3 stories high, ivy cascading down the western wing. Warm light spilled from every window, and she could see silhouettes moving inside, people who belonged in places like this. A valet took her keys with a polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. She could feel his assessment, "You're not one of them." The thought made her spine straighten. She'd earned her place here, even if she didn't understand why yet. The room of whispers inside, the foyer was breathtaking. A massive chandelier hung overhead, casting prismatic light across marble floors. Classical music floated through the air, mixing with the low murmur of conversation and occasional laughter. Jade recognized faces from the company's annual reports, executives, board members, people whose decisions affected thousands of lives. Well, a smooth voice said behind her. "I didn't realize we were extending invitations to the entire payroll this year." Jade turned to find Simone Blackwell, the CFO, standing with a crystal glass in hand. Her black dress probably cost more than Jade's monthly rent, and she wore it with the confidence of someone who'd never questioned her right to be anywhere. "Ms. Blackwell," Jade replied evenly. "Lovely to see you outside the office." Simone's smile was sharp. "I'm sure it is." She tilted her head, studying Jade like a particularly interesting specimen. "Tell me, how exactly did you manage this invitation? I'm genuinely curious." Before Jade could respond, a child's voice rang out across the room. "Aunt Simone, Uncle Benedict says you're being rude again." A little girl with dark curls and a velvet dress came bounding over. She looked up at Jade with open curiosity, no judgment in her bright eyes. "Hello. I'm Grace. Are you the lady Uncle Benedict has been talking about?" Jade's heart skipped. "Talking about?" "Grace," Simone said sharply, "go find your mother." But Grace ignored her, taking Jade's hand instead. "He told me someone very important was coming tonight. Someone who needed to know they mattered." "Is that you?" The empty chair. Grace pulled Jade toward the dining room, where a long table was set with such precision it looked like art. Every seat was filled except one, positioned at the far end, near the head of the table where Benedict would sit. The place setting was different from the others: older silverware, a china pattern that didn't match the rest, and a single white rose laid across the plate. "That's your seat," Grace announced proudly. The conversations around them dimmed. Heads turned. Jade felt dozens of eyes on her back, each gaze heavy with questions she couldn't answer. "Actually," a cultured voice said from behind her, "it's been waiting for quite some time." Benedict Hartley stepped into the room, and somehow, despite all the other people present, Jade felt like she was the only one he saw. He was tall, with silver threading through his dark hair and eyes that held both warmth and something harder to name, perhaps. Sadness, perhaps determination. He crossed the room toward her, his movement silencing everyone completely. "That chair," he said, his voice carrying to every corner, "has been empty for 3 years. Not because no one wanted to sit there, but because it was waiting for the right person." He stopped directly in front of Jade. "It was waiting for you." Jade's mouth went dry. "Mr. Hartley, I don't understand, Benedict, please." His smile was gentle. "And you will. But first, will you join us? Will you take the seat that's been yours all along, even if you didn't know it?" She wanted to ask 1,000 questions. She wanted to run. She wanted to understand how this made any sense at all. But something in his eyes, something honest and a little desperate, made her nod. "Yes," she whispered. The room erupted in a mixture of applause and uncomfortable murmurs. Simone's expression had gone from amused to something darker. Oliver Reed, an older gentleman with kind eyes, was smiling at her encouragingly from across the table. As Jade moved toward the chair, Benedict leaned in close enough that only she could hear. "I know this must seem strange," he said quietly. "But you saved my life once, even though you didn't know it. Tonight, I wanted to give you something back: acknowledgement, respect, and the truth about why that chair has been empty." The first secret. Jade sat down carefully, her mind racing. Saved his life? She'd barely exchanged a dozen words with Benedict Hartley in all her time at the company. Their paths rarely crossed. She was several levels below him in the hierarchy, essentially invisible. As dinner service began, Oliver Reed caught her eye from across the table. He raised his glass slightly in her direction, then mouthed 2 words that made her blood run cold: "She knew." She who? Knew what? A server placed a small envelope beside her plate. It wasn't part of the formal place setting, someone had put it there deliberately. Jade glanced around, but everyone seemed focused on their own conversations. With trembling fingers, she opened it. Inside was a photograph, old and slightly faded. It showed her standing outside a hospital 5 years ago, holding a coffee cup and looking exhausted. She remembered that day. It was the night her younger brother had been in a car accident. She'd spent hours in that waiting room, numb with fear, but there was someone else in the background of the photo, blurred but recognizable: Benedict Hartley, also waiting, also alone. Beneath the photo, in handwriting she didn't recognize, was a single sentence: "You were there the night Margaret died." He never forgot. Jade's hands began to shake. Margaret Hartley, Benedict's wife. She died 5 years ago. Jade remembered hearing about it at her previous company, how tragic it had been, how sudden. But Jade had been at the hospital for her brother. She'd never known Benedict was there that same night. Why did this matter? What could she possibly have done? "Ms. Winters." Benedict's voice pulled her back to the present. He was standing now, glass in hand, addressing the entire table. "I'd like to propose a toast." Everyone lifted their glasses, eyes turning toward him expectantly. "To those who show us kindness when we're invisible," Benedict said, his eyes finding Jade's. "To those who remind us what humanity looks like in the darkest hours. And to second chances, both for those who receive them and those who give them." Glasses clinked. Jade raised hers automatically, but she couldn't taste the wine when she sipped it. Her mind was spinning too fast, pieces of a puzzle she didn't know she was solving clicking into place. Across the table, Simone was watching her with an expression that sent chills down her spine. It wasn't just displeasure or jealousy anymore. It was fear, and Jade realized with sudden, terrible clarity: whatever secret had kept that chair empty for 3 years, whatever truth Benedict was preparing to tell, it wasn't just about her. It was about to change everything. Dinner had moved into its second course when Benedict quietly excused himself from the table. A moment later, Jade felt a gentle tap on her shoulder. One of the servers leaned down discreetly. "Mr. Hartley requests your presence on the east veranda, miss." Jade's heart hammered as she stood, trying to ignore the curious glances following her. Grace gave her an encouraging thumbs up, while Simone's fork paused midair, her jaw tight. The veranda was enclosed in glass, overlooking gardens that stretched into darkness. String lights twisted through bare branches, creating patterns of gold against the night. Benedict stood with his back to the door, hands in his pockets, staring out at nothing and everything. "You must think I've lost my mind," he said without turning around. Jade closed the door softly behind her. "I think you've invited me into something I don't understand." 5 years ago, Benedict began, his voice low and measured, "I sat in that hospital waiting room for 6 hours. The doctors kept telling me there was still hope, but I knew. Somehow, I knew Margaret was already gone." He finally turned to face her, and the raw pain in his eyes made her breath catch. "I couldn't cry. Couldn't scream. Couldn't feel anything except this hollow absence where my heart used to be." Jade remembered that feeling too well, the numbness that came with fear so profound it stopped resembling emotion at all. "And then you came in," Benedict continued. "This stranger in wrinkled clothes, carrying 2 cups of terrible hospital coffee. You sat down 3 chairs away from me, and you were crying. Not dramatically, just these quiet tears streaming down your face while you held your phone like it might shatter." She did remember. Her brother had just come out of surgery, and the relief had broken something loose in her chest. "You didn't know me," Benedict said. "Had no idea who I was. But after about 10 minutes, you got up, walked over, and set one of those coffees next to me. You said, 'I don't know what you're waiting to hear, but I hope it's good news. Nobody should be alone in places like this.'" Jade's eyes widened. She'd forgotten that moment entirely. It had seemed so small, so insignificant in the chaos of that night. "Then you went back to your seat," Benedict continued, "and 20 minutes later, a doctor came and told me my wife was gone. I sat there with that coffee you'd given me, and it was the only warm thing in the entire universe. The only proof that kindness still existed. Benedict, I never forgot your face," he said simply. "Couldn't forget it. And when you applied to Hartley Industries 18 months ago, I saw your name and your photo in the HR files. I told them to hire you. I wanted to thank you, but I didn't know how without making it strange, without making you uncomfortable. So I just watched. Saw how you worked, how you treated people, how you never asked for credit or recognition." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "That chair has been empty since Margaret's death. I couldn't bring myself to fill it, it felt like erasing her. But this year, I realized something. Margaret would have wanted someone like you sitting there. Someone who understands that small acts of humanity matter more than grand gestures. Someone who knows what it means to hold space for other people's pain." Jade felt tears burning behind her eyes. "I didn't do anything special. Anyone would have. But they didn't," Benedict interrupted gently. "Everyone else in that waiting room looked away. You didn't. And that mattered, Jade. It still matters. The photograph's real story, there's more, isn't there?" Jade asked, thinking of the photograph and its cryptic message. Benedict's expression shifted, something troubled crossing his features. "Yes. And it's where things get complicated." He pulled out his phone, showing her another photograph, this one much older, perhaps 10 or 12 years ago. It showed a young man in a sharp suit standing beside a woman in business attire. The woman was stunning, polished, ambitious looking. Jade recognized her immediately. "That's Simone," she breathed. "But who?" "Thomas Wright," Benedict said. "My former business partner. We built Hartley Industries together, started it from nothing. He was my closest friend." Past tense weighted the words with significance. "And he was engaged to Simone." Jade's mind raced. Was? Thomas had a gambling problem, Benedict explained. Hidden it brilliantly for years. By the time I found out, he'd embezzled nearly $3 million from the company. I had a choice: turn him in and destroy him publicly, or handle it quietly and let him disappear. What did you choose? I gave him a chance to repay it and resign quietly. Told him I'd keep the secret if he got help. Benedict's expression hardened. Instead, he ran. Took the money and vanished. Left Simone without explanation, left me with a financial hole and a broken trust. I had to report it eventually, couldn't hide that kind of loss. The investigation nearly destroyed the company. And Simone? Jade asked, though she was beginning to understand. Blamed me. Said I drove him away, that I should have covered for him completely. She was furious, humiliated. But she was also brilliant at her job, and I needed someone I could trust to help rebuild. So I promoted her to CFO, gave her a second chance. He shook his head. I thought she'd moved past it. I was wrong. Benedict showed her another photo on his phone. This one made Jade's stomach drop. It was the picture from the envelope, the one of her and Thomas Wright. Wait, she stammered. I don't know him. I've never, I know, Benedict said quickly. The photo's fake. Or rather, it's real, but manipulated. That's you at some conference or event, and that's Thomas from a completely different time and place. Someone with decent photo editing skills spliced you together. Simone, Jade whispered. Most likely. She's been trying to undermine you since you started getting recognition. I think she sees you as a threat, someone close to me, someone I trust. She's trying to manufacture a connection between you and Thomas, trying to make me doubt you. But why would I matter that much? I'm nobody, you're not, though. Benedict's voice was fierce now. You're everything she's not, genuine, kind, content without needing to dominate every room you enter. And tonight, by honoring you publicly, I made her worst fear real. I proved that character matters more than ambition, that quiet integrity beats loud achievement. The conspiracy deepens. A sharp knock interrupted them. Oliver Reed stepped onto the veranda, his kind face now creased with worry. Benedict, we have a problem. What kind? Oliver held up his phone, showing them an email. This just went out to the entire board. Supposedly from an anonymous whistleblower, claiming you've been embezzling funds through ghost employees. His eyes flicked to Jade apologetically. Including one Jade Winters, who allegedly doesn't exist in any HR database prior to 18 months ago. Jade felt the ground tilt beneath her. That's insane. I have employment records, references. Someone's altered the digital files, Oliver said grimly. Made it look like you were hired without proper vetting, paid through irregular channels. Combined with that photograph connecting you to Thomas, it suggests a pattern, that Benedict learned nothing from the first embezzlement and is actually complicit in a new scheme. Benedict's expression had gone dangerously cold. Simone. Almost certainly, Oliver agreed. She's been positioning herself to take over as CEO for months. This gives the board grounds to call for your immediate suspension pending investigation. There's an emergency meeting called for tomorrow morning. Can they really do that? Jade asked, her voice small. With enough evidence suggesting financial misconduct? Absolutely, Oliver said. Even if it's all fabricated, the appearance of impropriety is enough to force temporary removal. And once Benedict's out, Simone steps in as acting CEO. She'll have months to consolidate power before any investigation clears him. Benedict turned to Jade, and she saw something new in his expression, not just determination, but fierce protectiveness. I won't let her use you as a weapon against me, he said. Whatever happens, I'll make sure. No, Jade interrupted. Both men looked at her in surprise. She took a deep breath, finding strength she hadn't known she possessed. If this is about me, then I get a say. And I'm not running or hiding or letting her win by default. Jade. That night in the hospital, she said, meeting Benedict's eyes, you said nobody should be alone in places like this. Well, you're not alone now. Whatever fight is coming, I'm in it. A slow smile crossed Benedict's face, proud, relieved, and a little amazed. Margaret would have liked you, he said softly. She did, Oliver interjected quietly. Both Benedict and Jade turned to him in shock. What? Benedict breathed. Oliver pulled an old envelope from his jacket pocket. Margaret asked me to give you this if you ever found someone worth trusting again. She wrote it 2 weeks before she died, said she had a feeling her time was running short and wanted to make sure you knew what she'd want for you. With shaking hands, Benedict opened the letter. His eyes scanned the page, and Jade watched his face transform, grief, wonder, and something like peace washing over him in waves. She saw you, he whispered, still reading. That night in the hospital. She was conscious for a few minutes while I was getting coffee, and she saw you sit with me after. Saw you leave that coffee. His voice cracked. She wrote that she hoped I'd find you someday, that anyone capable of that kind of spontaneous kindness was someone who could understand why she loved me, because that's exactly the kind of thing I would do. Tears were streaming freely down his face now, and Jade felt her own eyes blur. She said, Benedict continued, voice barely audible, if you find that woman again, don't let fear or propriety stop you from thanking her. Life's too short to leave kindness unacknowledged. And if she's half as special as I think she is, she might just help you remember how to be whole again. The veranda door burst open. Simone stood there, Grace beside her looking frightened. How touching, Simone said, her voice dripping venom. Really, Benedict, this performance is almost believable. But I think it's time we stopped pretending and had an honest conversation, all of us. Her eyes locked on Jade with undisguised hostility. Starting with who you really are and why you've weaseled your way into Benedict's life using a dead woman's memory. Grace pulled away from Simone, running to Benedict and clinging to his leg. Uncle Benedict, she's scaring me. She said bad things about the nice lady. Benedict's jaw tightened. When he spoke, his voice was colder than Jade had ever heard it. Simone. My office. Now. Oh no, Simone smiled viciously. I think we have this conversation right here, right now, in front of everyone. Or would you prefer I send my evidence to the board tonight instead of waiting until morning? Oliver stepped forward. Simone, think very carefully about your next move. I've thought about nothing else for 5 years, she spat. 5 years of watching him play the grieving widower while building his perfect little empire. 5 years of being useful but never valued. Well, I'm done being useful. It's my turn now. She pulled out her phone, thumb hovering over the screen. Last chance, Benedict. Resign tonight, transfer control to me, and I'll bury all of this. You can fade away quietly, keep your dignity. Refuse, and by morning, you'll be facing criminal charges along with your little charity case here. The silence stretched taut as wire. Then Benedict smiled, a cold, dangerous expression that made even Simone falter. Go ahead, he said quietly. Send it. Because I have something better than threats, Simone. I have the truth. And I have proof. He pulled out his own phone, turning it to show security footage, Simone in her office late at night, clearly altering files on her computer, the timestamps visible. You're not the only one who's been preparing, Benedict said. The difference is, my evidence is real. Simone's face went white. Now, Benedict continued, his voice like steel, you're going to walk back inside, apologize to our guests for the disruption, and tender your resignation effective immediately. Or I call the police right now and have you arrested for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. You can't. Watch me. The standoff held for 3 heartbeats. Then Simone's composure shattered. She turned and fled, her heels clicking frantically across the marble floors. Oliver exhaled slowly. Well. That was dramatic. Grace looked up at Benedict with wide eyes. Is the nice lady really going to be okay? Benedict knelt down, brushing hair from his niece's face. "Yes, sweetheart. She is. Because sometimes, the right people show up at exactly the right time." He stood, extending his hand to Jade. "Shall we finish dinner? I believe we've earned it." Jade took his hand, feeling the tremor in both their grips, adrenaline, relief, and something else. Something that felt like the beginning of understanding that this night had changed everything. Walking back into the dining room felt like entering a different reality. The guests had clearly heard the commotion, voices had been raised, doors had slammed, but polite society dictated they maintain appearances. Conversations continued, though more quietly now, with frequent glances toward the empty doorway. Benedict kept Jade's hand in his as they entered, a gesture that wasn't lost on anyone present. Grace skipped ahead, climbing back into her seat with the resilience only children possess. "Ladies and gentlemen," Benedict announced, his voice calm but commanding immediate attention. "I apologize for the interruption. Ms. Blackwell has experienced a family emergency and had to leave rather suddenly. I'm sure you'll all join me in wishing her well." The lie was transparent but necessary. Around the table, knowing looks were exchanged. These were people who understood corporate warfare when they saw it. "Now then," Benedict continued, guiding Jade back to her seat, "where were we? Ah yes, I believe dessert is about to be served." As if on cue, servers appeared carrying delicate plates of autumn-spiced pear tart with cinnamon cream. The normalcy of it was almost absurd after everything that had just happened. Jade sat down, her heart still racing. Across from her, a woman in emerald silk leaned forward with curious eyes. "You must tell us, dear," she said warmly, "how you came to know our Benedict. He's been quite mysterious about you." Benedict answered before Jade could. "Catherine, you know I don't believe in mystery for its own sake. Jade and I met during one of the most difficult nights of my life, and she showed me a kindness I didn't know I needed." He looked at Jade as he spoke. Sometimes the most important people in our lives arrive in the quietest moments. The story finally told. Oliver Reed cleared his throat gently. "Perhaps, Benedict, this is the time to share what you've been carrying." Benedict nodded slowly, setting down his fork. Around the table, the conversations faded completely. Even Grace stopped eating her dessert, sensing the importance of the moment. "Most of you knew my wife, Margaret," Benedict began. His voice was steady, but Jade could see his fingers tremble slightly against his wine glass. "You knew how vibrant she was, how she could light up any room just by existing in it. What you might not know is how scared I was the night she died." The room was utterly silent now. "I'd built this company from nothing," he continued. "Conquered markets, outmaneuvered competitors, made decisions that affected thousands of lives. But in that hospital, I was powerless. Completely, utterly powerless. And I realized something that terrified me: I'd forgotten how to be human. How to accept kindness without analyzing its purpose. How to feel. Forgotten how to be human. How to accept kindness without analyzing its purpose. How to feel anything without trying to control it." He looked around the table, making eye contact with each person. Margaret was unconscious by the time I arrived at the hospital. The doctors said she might not wake up. So I sat in that waiting room, and I tried to feel something: grief, anger, fear, anything. But there was just nothing. I'd spent so many years building walls that when I actually needed to feel, I couldn't. Jade watched him, understanding now why that small gesture had meant so much. Then this woman, Benedict gestured to Jade, this complete stranger, sat down nearby. She was crying, really crying, the way people do when they've been holding themselves together too long and finally break. And I remember thinking, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. That's what love looks like when it's real. Several women at the table were wiping their eyes now. Even the men looked uncomfortable in that way people do when confronted with genuine emotion. "She gave me coffee," Benedict said simply. "Didn't ask who I was, didn't want anything from me. Just saw another human being having a terrible night and offered what comfort she could. And in that moment, I felt something crack open inside me, all the grief I'd been holding back, all the fear, all the love I'd had for Margaret. That coffee cup was like a key that unlocked everything. He turned fully to Jade now, his eyes bright with unshed tears. By the time the doctors came to tell me Margaret was gone, I was crying. Really crying, the way you're supposed to when you lose someone who meant everything. And it was because of you. Because you reminded me that it's okay to be vulnerable, to need kindness, to be human. Jade's throat was so tight she could barely breathe. I had no idea, she whispered. I know. That's what made it so perfect, you weren't trying to fix anything or impress anyone. You were just being decent. He smiled through his tears. Margaret actually regained consciousness for about 3 minutes while I was getting my own coffee. The nurses told me later that she saw you, saw what you did. She asked them to remember your face, said she wanted to thank you someday. But she slipped away before I got back, Benedict confirmed. But Oliver was with her. She told him that if I ever found you again, should remember that kindness isn't weakness. That the best leaders are the ones who understand suffering enough to prevent it in others. Oliver nodded, his own eyes damp. She said, if that woman could show compassion to a stranger in her darkest hour, imagine what she could teach Benedict about running a company that actually cares about its people. The empty chair's true meaning. So that chair, Benedict said, gesturing to where Jade sat, wasn't empty because I was grieving. Well, not just because of that. It was empty because I was waiting. Waiting to find you, to thank you, to tell you that you changed my life in ways you'll never fully understand. He stood, raising his glass. Everyone else followed suit instinctively. Margaret believed that every person we meet leaves a mark on our soul, Benedict said. Some marks are scars, some are lessons, and some, rare, precious ones, are reminders of who we're meant to be. Jade left that kind of mark. She reminded me that beneath the titles and the power and the responsibilities, we're all just people trying to survive our worst days. And the greatest gift we can give each other is the simple acknowledgement that those worst days are real and valid and survivable. To Jade, he said, his voice breaking slightly. Who saved my life without knowing it? Who deserved this chair not because of any grand achievement, but because she understood the most important truth, that small kindnesses matter more than grand gestures. To Jade, the table echoed. Glasses clinked. Jade was crying openly now, not caring who saw. Grace had somehow materialized beside her, small hand squeezing Jade's arm. You're nice, Grace whispered. Uncle Benedict doesn't cry for just anyone. The revelation about Simone. As dessert plates were cleared and coffee served, Oliver stood to make an announcement. Before we close the evening, he said, there's something else that needs to be addressed. The board has been made aware of certain irregularities in our financial reporting over the past year. The mood shifted immediately. Business faces replaced emotional ones. Simone Blackwell, Oliver continued carefully, has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. The evidence suggests she has been systematically falsifying records in an attempt to discredit both Benedict and several other key personnel, including Jade. Murmurs rippled around the table. Why? Someone asked. Benedict answered this time. Because 5 years ago, I made a choice that hurt her deeply. My former partner, her fiancé at the time, embezzled from the company. I gave him a chance to make it right, and he ran instead. Simone blamed me for driving him away, for not protecting him completely. He sighed. I thought promoting her was giving her a second chance to build something positive. Instead, she spent years planning revenge. The photograph she tried to use against Jade, Oliver added, was manufactured. We have the original files showing the manipulation. along with evidence of altered employment records, falsified financial reports, and communications with external parties attempting to destabilize the company. What happens now? Catherine asked. Now, Benedict said firmly, we rebuild. With transparency, with integrity, and with people who understand that success built on deception isn't success at all. He looked at Jade. I'm creating a new position, Director of Cultural Integrity. Someone whose entire job is to ensure we never lose sight of what actually matters, treating people with respect, acknowledging contributions regardless of hierarchy, and remembering that every person in this company deserves to be seen. Jade's eyes widened. Benedict, I can't. You can, he said gently. Because you already do it naturally. You've been doing it your entire life. The choice. Later, as guests began to depart and the evening wound down, Benedict and Jade found themselves alone on the veranda again. The night had grown colder, and he'd draped his jacket over her shoulders. You don't have to accept the position, he said quietly. I meant what I said about the chair, you deserve recognition. But I won't turn this into an obligation. Jade looked out at the garden, the fairy lights still twinkling in the darkness. Can I ask you something honest? Always. Is this about me, or is this about easing your guilt? About feeling like you owe me for something I barely remember doing? The question hung between them. Benedict was quiet for a long moment. Maybe it started as gratitude, he admitted. Maybe even guilt. But watching you these past 18 months, seeing how you move through the world with such quiet grace, that's not about debt. That's about recognition. He turned to face her fully. You're not a symbol of my grief or my redemption, Jade. You're remarkable all on your own. And yes, I want to work with you. Not because I owe you, but because I genuinely believe we could build something extraordinary together. What if I fail? She asked, voicing the fear she'd been carrying all night. What if everyone's right, and I don't belong in rooms like this? Then you'll learn, Benedict said simply. The same way I'm still learning. The same way we all are. He smiled. Besides, you've already proven you can handle the most important part, staying human in spaces that try to strip that away. Jade felt something settle in her chest, a sense of rightness she hadn't experienced in years. Okay, she said. Yes. I'll take the position. But on one condition. Name it. That chair in there, Margaret's chair. We don't leave it empty anymore, but we also don't forget what it represents. Maybe it rotates. Maybe each month, someone different from the company sits there. Someone who's shown the kind of quiet integrity that matters. So it becomes about celebrating that quality in everyone, not just me. Benedict's smile was radiant. Margaret would have loved that idea. Then it settled. Jade extended her hand formally, then laughed as Benedict pulled her into a hug instead. Thank you, he whispered against her hair. For the coffee, for tonight, for being brave enough to accept something you didn't think you deserved. Thank you, she replied, for seeing me when I'd gotten used to being invisible. Epilogue, 6 months later. The conference room at Hartley Industries had been transformed. The long table still dominated the space, but now, at the far end, there was a special chair, Margaret's chair, though it bore a new plaque now. For those who lead with kindness when no one's watching. This month's honoree was a young intern named Danny who'd spent his lunch breaks teaching coding to kids at a local community center. He sat in the chair looking overwhelmed and proud, while his team applauded. Jade stood at the front of the room, no longer the quiet coordinator who kept her head down. She wore confidence like she'd been born to it, though Benedict knew it had been hard-won. Leadership, she told the assembled team, isn't about titles or corner offices. It's about the choices we make when no one's checking our work. It's about remembering that every person in this building has a story, a struggle, a reason they need us to be better than just functional. After the meeting, Benedict found her in her new office, spacious, bright, with photos of her family displayed proudly on the desk. "How does it feel?" he asked, leaning in the doorway. "Right," she said simply. "Scary, but right." "Good." He paused. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you. If it's about the quarterly review format, I already sent you my suggestions." "Would you have dinner with me?" he interrupted. "Not a business dinner. Not a networking opportunity. Just dinner. With me." Jade looked up, surprise flickering across her features before transforming into something softer. "Benedict Hartley, are you asking me on a date?" "I'm attempting to," he said, suddenly looking vulnerable in a way that reminded her of that night in the hospital. "Though I'm apparently quite bad at it." She smiled. "For someone who's supposed to be a brilliant businessman, you really are terrible at personal negotiations." "Is that a no?" "It's a yes," she laughed. "It's been a yes for a while now, if we're being honest. I was just waiting for you to be ready." "I'm ready," he said. "Margaret would want me to be ready. And I think she'd approve of you." "I think she already did," Jade replied. "After all, she's the one who told you to find me." Benedict crossed the room, taking both her hands in his. "That night at Thanksgiving, when I said the chair was waiting for you, I meant it in more ways than I understood then." "I know," Jade said softly. "But we both needed time to figure out what that meant. What it could mean. And now?" "Now," she said, squeezing his hands, "I think we're ready to start writing a new story. One where the empty chair isn't about loss anymore, it's about possibility." Outside her window, the city stretched toward sunset, golden light painting everything hopeful. And in that moment, Jade understood something profound. Sometimes the most important turns in our lives happen because we chose kindness when it wasn't required, because we saw someone when they felt invisible, because we believed that small gestures could hold infinite meaning. The empty chair had been waiting. But it was never empty at all, it had always been full of possibility, of second chances, of the promise that people who lead with heart will always find their way home. And as Benedict smiled at her, that same smile from the night everything changed, Jade knew that home wasn't a place or a chair or even a person. It was the choice to show up, to be seen, to believe that you deserve a seat at the table, and then to make sure everyone else knows they deserve one too.